Kinich is released today, so let's look at his teams. Most of his damage comes from his skill. Due to his passive, you can do more of them if opponents are affected by burning or burgeon, so that's why you're going to see a lot of pyro. We are going to experiment with other elements and reactions though, so stick around for that. I found this first team to be Kinich's strongest team. Off-field pyro from either of Xiangling or Dia will give the burning aura. Whichever of the two you go for will hold Deepwood to shred the enemy's dendro resistance. Farine is going to vape a lot of her hits for big damage. Xiangling's damage won't be as high as usual if you go for her because she's holding Deepwood and she's not vaping. Her damage is brought up by Farina's fanfare buff though, and it's a nice buff for Kinich too. If you don't have a good Obsidian Codex 4-piece because you use 93 fragile resin in the domain which you spent the whole of Fontaine saving up as well as farming it every day for the past 3 weeks and it's still dropping nothing but hot dog shit, Farine is going to enable you to run Marechaussee Hunter, which is now in the strongbox, so you can take 2 big Hoyoverse dicks in the arse instead of just 1. As for who you should choose between Dia and Xiangling, Xiangling gives more damage, Dia gives more defensive support and is prettier. If you're sick of Bennett, you can trade him for Baiju, give him Deepwood instead, and then maybe run Instructor on your Pyro unit to give Farina more elemental mastery. Sticking with the French supports, we're going to trade Le Cake for Le Cabbage Shower. Quick disclaimer, despite a lot of people's assumptions, you don't need Emily for Kinich, however he is limited for optimal supports and she does synergize well with him. They both benefit from opponents being affected by burning. Whichever of Dia or Xiangling you go for, same reasons as the last team, giving them a Favonius weapon will help Emily with charging her burst up. I don't really feel Dia or Xiangling are necessary in this team. Dia's defensive support isn't needed because we have Bennett, Xiangling's damage isn't great while holding Deepwood and not vaping, all we need is a Natlan Pyro support who can hold 4-piece Cinder City. C'est magnifique. Okay, so we know Xiangling and Bennett's a good pair to run with Kinich. What if you don't have Emily or Farina for that last slot though? Well, in that case, I guess you can get fucked. But seriously, I think the lack of options for that flex slot is Kinich's biggest weakness. You could stick a cryo character in there though, and they have slow enough application that they won't interfere with the burning aura. They'll even benefit from it melting their hits. For you free-to-play players and newer players, this might be your best bet. So I'd consider 2 options. The first is Rosaria, who's going to give the team crit rate from a passive, which means, along with the Obsidian Codex 4-piece, you can focus purely on crit damage on Kinich. She could also hold Deepwood, meaning you could put Xiangling back on a normal build. The second option is Chongyun. If you have his C2, he's going to reduce cooldowns by 15%, which isn't broken, but it does mean you can shorten your rotation. Xiangling's burst will now have a 17-second cooldown instead of 20. Just make sure you have enough energy recharge to get a burst back in time to make use of it. With you getting Melt off, Chongyun's burst damage is a nice little bonus. If you don't care at all for his burst damage, you could give him 4-piece Cinder City to boost Xiangling's damage a bit, or 4-piece Exile to give the team more energy. As mentioned earlier, Kinich isn't only designed for burning, he also works well with Burgeon. You might already have a Burgeon team though, so the thing that's different about Kinich Burgeon teams is that you can throw Bennett in there and benefit from his attack buff. This wouldn't be the case in traditional Burgeon teams where you'd usually have a Dendro driver like Nahida, Baiju or Yaoya that don't need the extra attack. Xingqiu benefits from the attack buff too. If you wanted a more traditional Burgeon team, you could swap Bennett out for Yelan. It's still slightly different to the Burgeon teams you're used to playing because Kinich benefits from Yelan's damage buff more than a Dendro driver would. Now we're going to talk about a Bloom team, which I know Kinich isn't designed for, but bear with me. All teams in Genshin have 4 characters and damage is distributed among them differently. With Arlecchino, Kazuha, Bennett and Zhongli for example, Arlecchino is the only one dealing significant damage. She's going to be dealing almost all of the team's damage, so it's considered a hypercarry team. In a team of Arlecchino, Fischl, Chevreuse and Beidou, Arlecchino is still the main damage dealer, but the percentage of damage she's contributing to the team is lower than a percentage in the first team. With Bloom teams, the Blooms themselves are essentially a 5th unit in the team. We usually pick 4 units that create as many Bloom seeds as possible and buff the Bloom seeds' damage as much as possible. Something like Nahida, Nalu, Collate and Kokomi for example is essentially a team where the Bloom seed is the hypercarry. In this team here, the damage distribution is switched up. Instead of the blooms acting as a hyper carry, it's more balanced like the Arlecchino overloaded team I talked about. Kinich, Farina and Yelan are dealing large percentages of the team's damage, and this time the bloom seeds are just off-field sub-DPSs that deal consistent but smaller damage. They're just here to bridge some of the gap from not running Kinich with Pyro. Farina gives a buff to everyone and Yelan gives her buff to Kinich. The Dendro Resonance gives the team some elemental mastery, which is good for blooms because no one's built for elemental mastery. The Hydro Resonance is good for giving extra HP to Farina, Yelan and Baiju. It won't be as strong as the teams with Pyro units and definitely not one I recommend for floor 12, but with Bloom being an AoE reaction, it's cool to have a single target variant. Now let's say they put out a Natlan unit with the ability to heal, who can also hold 4-piece Cinder City, while also maybe shredding opponent resistances. That could be a good unit, right? Even if they don't do anything for Dendro, the two Hydro units here would benefit from this healer more than Kinich benefits from Baiju. This team technically has all the elements for Hyper Bloom but will be triggering hardly any. I consider it a quicken team with Farina there not for her element but her off-field damage and buffs. Like the last team, it's not making use of Kinich's passive for more instances of his skill, but that's fine. Fischl's dealing more damage here than your Xiangling was in most of those other teams, and she enables quicken. This is going to buff Kinich's damage, so he's using his skill less, but it's hitting harder when he does use it. Again, it's not his best team and I don't recommend it as your main Kinich team, but it's an option for those without Emily. If you don't have Farina, you could even swap her out for Yelan. That way Kinich is still getting buffed by someone's passive and she can give Favonius particles to Baiju. There are several reasons that Baiju's here. Firstly, he heals the team enough to counter Farina's bleed. Next, his passive buffs the damage bonus received from spread for Kinich. Finally, he can hold Deepwood so you don't have to gimp anyone else. The Dendro Resonance is a nice bonus too, because I doubt you're building Elemental Mastery on Kinich. This team would open up the opportunity to run Elemental Mastery weapons though, like Rain Slasher or Mailed Flower. Seeing as though you might struggle for Elemental Mastery in that last team without changing builds, this team here gives you a bunch from Nahida. Bennett's there for his attack buff, but if we can get some burning reactions off too for Kinich's passive, even better. Nahida's introduction also gives us some AoE, which is appreciated because Kinich is limited in that regard. If you decided you can't do it anymore and are more sick of using Bennett than you are of listening to a How, sorry mate, you can swap Nahida out for Carrara and then Bennett out for Beidou. This way you're still getting AoE, the Dendro Resonance and Deepwood Shred from sticking it on Carrara. Carrara's C6 gives the team 12% elemental damage, which is appreciated too. Imagine there being a new Dendro on-fielder and not looking at a Hyper Bloom team. This seems pretty simple, as I'm sure you already play some variant of it with a different on-field Dendro unit. Again, not Kinich's best team, but Hyper Bloom is so strong it works anyway. There's also the option to swap Xingqiu out for Yelan. I'd argue that's better to be honest, because even though you'll be making less blooms, it justifies Kinich's place somewhat because he benefits a lot from a passive. With Yelan's slower application, you might even get a cheeky quicken reaction off every now and then to buff Kinich. For a score out of 10, I'd give Kinich a 7.5. His team damage in those first couple of teams against single targets is genuinely close to S tier for a C0 character. I think all he needs is an off-field Natlan Pyro support to take Xiangling or Dia's place, and a couple of his teams might be S tier. I also think it'd be nice if his burning teams had more flexes. Emily and Farina worked well, but a lot of people skipped Emily, with their options being either A, run the Hydro Archon, or B, use a Burgeon team. I feel like that's restrictive. I sympathize for people in my situation who chose Kinich as their first 5-star for Natlan. They don't really get to play the whole character. Anyway, I'm sure Hoyoverse are several steps ahead of us and will solve this issue with new releases in the future. I'm going to be dropping Abyss videos where I showcase some of the experimental teams like the Bloom team on floor 12. If you're interested in seeing them, subscribe to the channel and take it easy.